everything that when you're writing, you're always writing your characters in scenes. And a scene is any situation in which your character has got a goal and they're pursuing it, and it's where all the cool action stuff happens. But where you really get the audience and where you really get them to care about your character is in the spaces that come between those scenes, which are called sequels, as in sequential, not as in part two. So you're crafting, and I do have some thoughts on sequels, and we can get to that. But as a crafter, when you're writing, you do have to be aware of what a sequel is and and when to use one and how to use it most effectively, because that's when you really make people. That's when you make them laugh. That's when you make them cry. That's where you do things that. That's where you give them those good gut punches that you get them right in the feels, and that's where you do it, is in sequels. So it is important to have big flashy action scenes where you're doing cool stuff and your character's doing cool things, and you've got the witty dialogue and the repartee going back and forth. But if you don't have that scene where they sit down with their best friend and go over how incredibly wrong they've been and how they need to change the way they act, nobody's really going to care about the action. It's just going to be very flat.
What is up, everybody? You're listening to episode 80 of SFF Addicts. I'm your host, Adrian M. Gibson, and welcome to your weekly dive into the world of science fiction, fantasy, and writing craft. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, the Chewie to my Han Solo, the Joker to my Commander Shepard, my dear MJ Kuhn. How are you, MJ?
I am great, and lamenting again that I still don't know how to do the Chewie call. Gotta learn that.
You'll figure it out. There we go.
There we go. Let's just get that as a sound bite. We'll just put it in.
And if you want to support MJ and her work, you can go pick up Among Thieves. If you like a ragtag crew who does some swashbuckling, like the Cinder Spires series, for instance, you can go pick up Among Thieves, as well as the sequel, Thick as Thieves, which are both out now. And you can support MJ and her work. As well, a quick note for everyone out there listening or watching, the official SFF Addicts Patreon and Merch Store are live, so go check the links in the description to support what we do here. Also, don't forget to rate and review the podcast on your favorite podcast app, and subscribe to the FanFiAddict YouTube channel, where this and every other episode of the show is available in full video. And now, welcoming back our guest, Jim Butcher, author of the Dresden Files, the Cinder Spires, and more. How are you, Jim?
Good.
Very terse. I like it.
Excellent.
I try not.
And that was Jim doing the Chewie call earlier, so you can thank him for that. All right. Well, to start off this masterclass, this is part two of our two-part chat with Jim, so I recommend checking out part one to get to know him better. Today, though, we're getting too fast, too furious. Thanks for that, MJ. As we talk about the best ways to craft an impactful sequel. To kick off this masterclass, we're going to talk a little bit about great sequel stories. Sequels in books, films, video games are often seen as a step down from the first installment. So, Jim, what are, in your opinion...
Well, we should get things straight right off.
Hell yeah. What are some sequels that are, for you, even better than their predecessors?
I'm not even talking about those. Follow-up stories and crafting sequels are two completely different things.
Ooh.
A sequel. Okay. Everything that when you're writing, you're always writing your characters in scenes. And a scene is any situation in which your character has got a goal and they're pursuing it, and it's where all the cool action stuff happens. But where you really get the audience and where you really get them to care about your character is in the spaces that come between those scenes, which are called sequels, as in sequential, not as in part two. So you're crafting, and I do have some thoughts on sequels, and we can get to that. But as a crafter, when you're writing, you do have to be aware of what a sequel is and when to use one and how to use it most effectively, because that's when you really make people. That's when you make them laugh. That's when you make them cry. That's where you do things that. That's where you give them those good gut punches that you get them right in the feels, and that's where you do it, is in sequels. So it is important to have big flashy action scenes where you're doing cool stuff and your character's doing cool things, and you've got the witty dialogue and the repartee going back and forth. But if you don't have that scene where they sit down with their best friend and go over how incredibly wrong they've been and how they need to change the way they act, nobody's really going to care about the action. It's just going to be very flat.
Agreed. Yeah. What are some of your favorite sequels then? Some that really stand out to you in order to, kind of encapsulate that scene sequel
Go watch. Oh my gosh, I can't remember his name now. And he's a director, and he did Terminator 2 and Aliens. Cameron, James Cameron. Cameron is brilliant at sequels. It's why he's been such a successful director. If you go watch Aliens, all the little scenes between Ripley and Newt, that's all sequel work. It's the stuff that, they're not busy fighting aliens right now. They're afraid of things that are happening in the future. But, Ripley sees this little girl who's been through so much trauma and who is so terrified, and she just tries to make her life a little bit nicer. And you could have done without those scenes and still had the alien story, but it wouldn't have meant anywhere near as much when Ripley shows up at the end in the exosuit to take on the alien queen and gets all maternal mama bear on her. It's all that stuff that builds. Your sequels, everything you do in a sequel should build towards those big moments that you want to write later on in the story. So it's very important that you hit those and that you give the readers the emotional foundation they need in order to pay off something really well later on in the story. I mean, you want them to be invested, and in order to get readers to invest again and again, you've got to pay off reliably. So if a reader is invested in a couple of characters who have a will they won't they thing going, it needs to go somewhere eventually, or they're just not gonna be into it. They're just not gonna be into you. They're not gonna trust you.
Yeah, that's why Mass Effect 2 is one of my favorite sequels ever, because it's like it does everything that you're noting on in terms of giving that intimacy. You have the crew on the Normandy and your ability to go on their personal side quests and expand upon their stories.
The loyalty missions.
The loyalty missions.
Although now that I think about it, both Aliens and Terminator 2 were really amazingly good sequels in their own right.
Yeah.
Aliens was a different kind of story than the first Alien. But it was done so well, and they made the characters so human that you actually cared about it a bit when they died. So as they were whittling the characters away one by one until Ripley was all on her own. I mean, that was really that was just well done. It was well. A good storyteller just manipulates the hell out of the audience and makes them like it. And I got really angry when my writing teacher told me that, but it's the truth. And so the better you understand how human emotions work, how human psychological processes work, the better you're going to be able to make your characters relate to your audience and to show them who they really are. I mean, if you've got a character who's a complex shades of gray character, they're not going to seem complex shades of gray if you don't give them those sequel moments where they get to do things that the reader wouldn't expect based upon their appearance and what they've been doing so far. That's why everybody liked in the new Ahsoka series. That's why everybody liked Baylan Skoll, because they gave him those little moments where Ray Stevenson got to say, "It's just that there are so few Jedi. It seems a shame." And it's like that's not something that a Sith says. And so that creates this question about who he is. That little moment, just that one little line. I mean, it did so much, and the fact that he was able to deliver it in such kind of a haunted way speaks a lot to his ability as an actor, which I think got overlooked because he was so big. And also it speaks well of whoever wrote that scene.
Yeah, it's like
that was well done.
It's like adding the complexity that will
and you have to do that. You can't do that in the middle of a furious firefight. Mm-hmm. You can't do that while Ahsoka is doing space ballet and chopping fighters apart with her light. It's not going to happen.
That's why fight scenes with dialogue are often so like awkward.
They can be, or I always thought that the Jedi and the Sith really got together to duel just because they couldn't really have a debate society.
That's like their form of debate.
It didn't work out. Nobody would admit that they were wrong, but at least in a lightsaber fight, someone would have to admit that they were dead. Yeah.
The ultimate debate.
Yeah, exactly. But I really miss the philosophy discussions during lightsaber fights. I think we should get back to more of those.
Right, let's bring them back. So for writers that are working to improve the impactfulness of their sequels, following those scenes, what are some key elements for you personally? Like, are there building blocks? Are there things that people can, kind of be looking for, hallmarks of what makes a great sequel, or like touchstones?
There are building blocks. Yeah, they all work the same way. They're building blocks. They go in a specific order. The only thing you have to decide is how much weight you give to each one. So when you're writing a sequel, um, all right, let's go to an experience that most people have had. Not everyone, but most people have been in an automobile accident of some kind. All right, you've been in a collision. So I want you to think back to that moment when you were in an automobile accident. And right after you have it, there's the crash, the glass flying everywhere. That's the end of the previous scene. All right, so now you're in a sequel. So what happens the first thing? The first thing that happens is your emotions kick in absolutely first thing. Oh my God, am I dead? Am I dead? You know, or maybe it's how could they possibly have pulled through that stop sign without stopping? Or how could they not know I was going through that stop sign without stopping? Or you know, it's a number of emotional reactions that you're going to have. Um, that can range from, you know, that can cover a whole spectrum of stuff. But the first thing that happens is you have that emotional bam. That's what happens first. So, you know, when you get through the scene where you've just gotten away from the Death Star, and where the characters in Star Wars have just gotten away from the Death Star, and Ben Kenobi has just died, and the ship is, you know, the Millennium Falcon is flying away, and Luke is just sitting at that table crushed because his mentor has died, the person that he has sort of transferred his familial allegiance to, with the death of his family, is now dead as well. And he's just shocked, and you know, Leia has to come up and put the blanket around him, and all he says is, I can't believe he's gone. And R2 makes a sad sound, and it's just this little thing, but it's this little thing that gives you that humanity of the character in that moment. So the first thing you do is you have your emotional reaction. The second thing that happens is that then your reason starts to cut in. So when you're in that car accident, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. Oh, what am I okay? Am I alive? And then your reason cuts in and you go, okay, wait a minute, am I hurt? And you kind of scan yourself. It's okay, am I bleeding anywhere? No, I'm okay. Okay, I've got a little cut on my arm. It's not a big deal. Okay, the people in the other car, are they okay? And so and then you go and you see what's going on with them. Um, and in other words, your brain kicks in, and then you start to kind of rationally deal with the things that are happening in the situation around you. Now, this is the sequel that you get in all the procedural dramas on TV, when people are stopping and they're talking about, and you know, they've just got done in, you know, Bones and Booth have just got done investigating a scene, and they're done looking at the scene, and then they're talking about what happens, and they're going through it bit by bit. Well, because of this on the Bones, this means this happened. Because of this particular sort of degradation of the soft material, you know, the soft tissue, we know that this happened such and such a time ago. And you know, it kind of goes down, and they kind of go through their list of things that they can rationally put together. The next stage of a sequel is review. That's when your character goes and kind of takes the emotional reaction they've just had, and the rational reaction they've just had, and they apply it to what's gone before in the story. They think back to what's going ahead. So if you're in your car accident, you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, I'm in an accident, I'm going to be late to work. You know, it's that sort of thing where you take it in the greater context of what's going on. And you can go through several cycles of emotion, reason, review, because, you know, oh my gosh, I'm going to be late to work. I'm so mad at so and so for making me leave 5 minutes late. You know, or I wouldn't have been in this accident at all. Okay, you know, that's not really going to help me right now. I'm going to be late to work. I'm going to have to deal with that. So, you know, that's and you, as long as you do it in that order, you can circle that runway several times. Usually I find it more efficient if you don't do it more than about 3 times. So the rule of 3 works pretty well all the way through writing. I believe big time in magic and writing. And so, you know, you do something 3 times, you're doing it with intention. And I think that the reader picks up on that. But and then after you've done emotion, reason, review, then the next step you have is decision, where your character has to decide, what am I going to do next? So, you know, you decide, okay, I'm going to get out of this car and go over there and make sure everybody's okay. Then I'm going to call the police. Then we're going to sort all this out. And after I've gotten the police called and we're waiting for them to show up and on the way, then I'll call into work and I'll tell them what's going on. And I'll tell them I can't be there because I've been in a car accident. And that decision, and then what that decision does is that once your character makes the decision of what to do next, you've given your character a new goal and you're ready for the next scene. So your character, so your character can get to the end of that and say, okay, well, if we're going to do all this, then we need to talk to so and so. All right, then because so and so will have this information that we need to catch this guy. All right, then we go to so and so that leads you off to your next scene. And you can write every book you ever write, scene sequel, scene sequel, scene sequel, and it will have a logical structure that your reader will follow all the way to the end. And it's one of those things that this is a very difficult concept. It's not a complicated concept, but it's difficult you have to practice it. You kind of have to work it into your scenes. But whenever you're writing a sequel, just write emotion, reason, review, decision, and understand that that's what you're going to be doing when you write that. And as long as you can do that, then your character is going to be understandable to your reader. Now, different readers like different things in their sequels. So, for instance, if you're writing a romance, you're not going to have a whole lot on the reason portion of any given sequel in the romance, because every romance reader is there for the emotion. So you're going to be writing, a long emotional reaction to the scene that they just had with the hero or heroine, and then you're going to. And then you're going to there will be like a little bit of reason to fit in there. Usually, as far as I can tell in romances, it's usually characters telling themselves they've abandoned reason, and then some review and some decision, and then you move on to the next scene. If you're writing a police procedural, a mystery, the emotions are not going to be as big. I mean, think of all the hard-boiled PI guys. They're not big on emotional reactions to things. When they walk up to a body, I mean, they're staring at a corpse. They'll take in the corpse, they'll take in the greater context of the corpse, how it fits into everything around it, but they don't get really worked up about it as far as their feelings go. So when you're writing that kind of story, you're going to be much heavier on the reason portion. If you're writing a political book, you're going to be big on reviews, because the littlest things that happen can change giant contexts. So you're going to be in that review portion of how what you've just experienced fits into the greater picture a lot more heavily in that kind of a book. And then at the end, you have the character make the decision, and the decisions that your character makes really tells the reader who they are. So when your character says, you know what, I'm setting aside my own personal safety to go into this real dangerous place, to talk to this real dangerous person about something that he does not want to talk about, because I want to help this little girl, that tells the reader, that's who your character, this is who your character is. And that's all. That's how you show them. That's how you show people who your characters are. You hear over and over again, show, don't tell. And the way that you show people that is you show them in these sequels. You show them who your character is by sticking them as hard into that character's skin suit as you possibly can. By having them live through that moment with the character, because that's really what we're all here to do in the books. We're not there to watch. We're not there to watch Frodo struggle with Gollum over the ring. We're there to struggle with Gollum over the ring. So the better, the warmer of, in my opinion, for most books, the warmer a viewpoint you can give, the more you can show a character's their sense of character and self through their emotions and through their decisions, the more people are going to open up to that character, because it's kind of how you be vulnerable with another human being, and we're doing it with simulated human beings on a page. But it gets the same reaction out of the reader. And as long as you can kind of understand that that's how human emotions work. That's how we work as people. We go emotion, reason, review, decision. That's how we navigate life. And so if you can show your character doing that, you create that much closer a bond between the reader and your character. And it's very, I mean, it's like I said, it's simple, but not easy. It's like lifting the engine block out of your car. That's simple, but it's not easy. And you have to practice it and learn it. But I mean, I just started off, that was the thing that made the big difference for me in my writing. That was the big change between the previous book and the first book of the Dresden Files, where my writing teacher said, you did it, this is professional quality, was because I started paying more attention to my sequels. And I would when I was outlining, I would get an index card and I would outline on the page, okay, here's the sequel, here's the emotions he's feeling, here's the reason he's got to go through to get to the next scene, here's his review that he puts into a greater context, and here's his decision. And once I knew those things, it was easy to write the scene. And you can do all kinds of sequels. Sequels can be, just the character reacting with themselves. Sequels can be the character having a heart-to-heart with a best friend. Sequels can be the character in a moment of break between, this enormously long knockdown, drag-out fight, having just an open moment with the villain, and understanding something about themselves as they face him. You can be as creative as you want with how you put your sequel together, as long as you go in the right order.
And
as long as you go emotion, reason, review, decision.
And with this kind of scene sequel concept in mind, I really, really like this. One of the big challenges when it comes to going from book to book is this sort of previously on sort of text, incorporating what happened before into the text, such that the reader gets that refresher, they get that explainer to understand, like, where is the character at, where's the world at, and then striking that balance between giving the readers enough context without over explaining. So with the scene sequel concept in mind, how would you approach that kind of thing within a single book, but also from one book to the next?
Don't repeat sections of text. What I really enjoy seeing and doing myself is if you can write something that happened before and have that one little stinger line of dialogue at the end, that short little easily remembered, kind of punctuation at the end of whatever happened, and then you can just refer back to that line, within the same story, which will refer people back to what they were feeling when they were reading that, and you sort of get them to almost subconsciously incorporate what happened into what they just read. That's one of the stronger ways to do it. It's almost one of those situations. This is one of the few places that you should tell, don't show. Is if you're in book 13 of a series and you're referring to something that happened in book 3 of a series, and you just say, okay, this happened way back when. And you put it in just at the shortest terms possible, and the long-term readers will go, "Yep, that happened back then," and then they'll feel good because they knew that. And the people who just got there will go, "Oh, wait a minute, that happened back then? Okay, well, that happened back then. I'll have to go back and buy that book and read it." But okay, it makes sense. It's a logical building block that I need to get through this story, and most readers will, for the most part, at least in my experience, readers will give you the benefit of the doubt of, okay, this is the rule for how fairies work. They can't tell a lie, right? Okay, got it. I don't need to know the whys. I just need to know that that's the rule, and I don't need to know why gravity works. I just need to know which way is down.
Oh, that's
that
a great comparison, though, because I feel like a lot of times I at least have to stop myself from over-explaining some things, because I feel like readers want the context, but you don't always need it.
Readers want the context, but they're also very smart. And if we're talking about fantasy readers here, people for whom the real world is not complicated enough. So they want a world with additional rules and more things that can happen and more threats. And that this is the kind of person we're talking about. They can put things together just fine. You really don't have to do nearly as much as you think you do, at least in my experience.
Yeah.
Respect your audience.
Right.
Smart readers know you're doing it. They like it.
Yeah.
That's great advice. No, so I feel like a great sequel always kind of dives into, clearly an emotional reaction to something, but I think it kind of opens the door to a question, something that was left unanswered from the last scene, something that is yet to be discovered, right?
Often does.
What's your advice for kind of planting the seeds within your scenes that you can then expand upon in your sequels?
Okay, the important thing about scenes is knowing how to end them. And every scene is essentially a question. My character's after this goal, is he going to get it? That's the question of each scene. And there's only so many answers you can give to those questions. And you can say, yes, he gets the goal. That moves you forward, but it's boring. And I don't like that. So And it doesn't let you beat your characters up enough, and I'm into that. So the next answer you can get is yes, but, which means yes, he gets the goal that he's after, but there's an additional complication, or there's something he has to make a deal that's going to pay off, that he's going to have to pay off in the future, or yes, but he gets shot in the leg and now he's going to be dealing with that the rest of the book, that sort of thing. Yes, but is a good answer. The next answer you can get is just no. He doesn't get what he's after. Just no. The door gets slammed in his face. That can be useful because it shows who your character is in the face of adversity and conflict. But it's also it's sort of a dead end that forces you to circle back and to try and find another way around that no. Because if you get that no shut in your face, then the only thing you can do is back up and try another angle, or wait for further developments or something like that, which can be handy. You can still use those just straight no's to show an awful lot about your character, which is really what this whole game is. It's who is this person. But my absolute favorite answer to any given scene is not yes, but, not no, not merely no, but no, and furthermore. Not only do you not get what you're after, but something goes horribly wrong, and the whole thing just got more complicated. And that is my absolute favorite thing to do in scenes, because it forces you to be more creative as a writer. It forces your character to overcome more adversity. It in general just sort of shows your skill as a writer in terms of being able to present something unexpected. Because as human beings, we tend to be, our general programming is something is either positive, negative. That's what we're used to. Is this going to eat me? Yes, no. Will I die if I eat this? Yes, no. That's sort of where we came from. So when you play with yes, but, and no, and furthermore, that's when you start getting into the areas that people, oh my God, what is he going to do now? How is he going to get out of this one? And that is your, that's the fun as a writer. That's how you set up a really good sequel. Because when you get a really good no and furthermore, and the character just goes into the sequel going, I'm screwed, then you sort of see who that person is, and then you have to say, okay, you know what? No, there is a way out of this. I've got this. I've got a plan. Here we go. And that is the kind of character that people like to see, the one that runs into stuff and that continually runs into things that are difficult to overcome and manages to get over, around, under, or through them.
Yeah, and one of the best parts is when the world, like you're talking about in the last episode, about apologies, I can't remember the name of the writer, Lois Bujold, and the way that she melded character and world building and all these different and plot together. For me, when a character is able to seamlessly incorporate into the world around them, and that sort of acts as a foil for them to get into these sorts of situations, I think that's a really beautiful combination. And so from your perspective, how do you kind of balance that in terms of fleshing out the character in combination with the world, adding lore and elements into the world, and then adding on to that as you go? With a series like the Dresden Files, you have so many things that you're adding into the world itself and the ways in which the character interacts with those things. How do you kind of balance that without creating like plot holes and inconsistencies and all that kind of stuff?
I have 3 rules for that that I work. All right, the first one is Mark Twain's rule, which is the 2-to-1 rule. Mark Twain said that when you're writing a fantasy, you should have 2 familiar elements for every 1 fantastic element. So Dresden might have unbelievable cosmic power, but his car is broken down and he's really having trouble making the rent this month. And that is something that we've all been in that place, and we can go, yep, that sucks. I've been there. And that makes, so even though he has phenomenal cosmic power and that makes him completely alien to most of our life experiences, he's got these other things that we can identify with and that we can vibe with. The second thing is a concept that my writing teacher called "put the Yeti on the couch," and what that means is like when you're talking about, when you're describing somebody's living room, you don't make a big deal about the fact that there's a Yeti on the couch. You just describe the Yeti on the couch and move along, to describe the rest of the place. When there's a fantastic element there, when you're in that world, to the people in that world, it's just okay. Yeah, a squirrel's outside. It's about the same thing. Yeah, there's a Yeti. Okay, hey, what's up? And you don't treat it like it's a big deal. Which it's sort of the cool guys walk away from explosions without looking back concept. As a writer, that's your version of that. You put something completely wild and unbelievable, and you have it right there, right in front of everybody, and you treat it like it's no big deal. And that helps it feel more familiar and helps keep it from being quite so alien. You sort of framed up this fantastic element to be just another part of the living room. And that way, when people see it, they can go, oh, okay, I get it. And then the third thing that I like to use is called the joy of idiocy. And the concept of the joy of idiocy in writing is that you keep an idiot around. Now, the idiot's job is to ask questions that the readers would naturally ask, but the idiot can do it and be a dummy, and then the reader gets the information and doesn't have to feel like a dummy getting it. So it's always handy to have somebody around who doesn't know what's going on, who keeps demanding explanations. In the Dresden Files, for the longest time, that was Murphy. Murphy was the one who, she was the representative of the regular mortal establishment. She was the normal person who had to deal with all this supernatural weirdness and had to go through Dresden as her interpreter to kind of understand what was going on. So Murphy was the idiot for a long time. Butters was the idiot for a couple of books. There's usually somebody who comes along who doesn't know what's happening and has to have things explained to them by Dresden. In the new one, it's his new apprentice. Apprentices are great for that because they can know nothing. And you can have them ask any question you want. And people go, yeah, I believe he didn't know that. And if you do it that way, then not only are you building the relationship between the idiot and your viewpoint character, not only are you establishing two characters at the same time, you're also getting information under the table to the reader saying, look, I know you didn't know this, but here you go. Don't worry about it. I've got this dummy here asking questions for you. And so the more craft elements you get done at any one time, generally speaking, the more efficient your writing's going to be, the more it's going to flow, the more people are going to pay attention to the story that's happening on the movie screen in their heads, and less attention to the little squiggles on the page. That's ultimately your goal as a writer, is to have people reading and to have them so taken up with your chicken marks that they're creating this world for you inside their heads. And that's your job to make that happen. As writers, that is our job. And the more efficiently we can write, the more things we can get done at the same time, because the human brain is an incredible processing machine that can handle so much at a time. And that's why, you kind of have to be focused, and, you have to go over the writing more than once, and why you have to say, you know what, I can do better than this, and do it again. And then, the person who comes along and reads it, and they're just reading it all at once, and they think you're a genius. And it's like, no, I've layered, into this 15 minutes of reading that you did, I layered 6 hours of work,
Right.
So you just feel like you, but I'm not. But it feels like that. It does seem that way. It's a good trick.
And it goes back to what you were saying earlier in terms of respecting the readers, because like our brains, as good as the biological processing machines as they are, they do siphon a lot of stimuli. And the more efficient you can be with your writing, the more likely the reader is going to be more engaged, because their imagination is hooked into the process, and they are
that's when
creating
up till 3.
Yeah, they're creating at the same time that they're reading. Mm-hmm.
And that's really what you want. You want people so into what you're doing that they're up until 3 a.m.
Yeah,
as a writer or otherwise, but especially as a writer.
Yeah.
Or otherwise.
I want you to lose sleep.
Right? And that is the greatest honor, though. If it's like, oh, I lost sleep from your book, it's like, you're welcome.
I know. And they're going, I'm sorry. And what you want to say is, I meant that to
right?
happen.
Yeah. Like, oh, I'm sorry. Exactly what I wanted to happen happened. No.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. So that was great on world building. I think that's obviously a huge piece of the puzzle. I want to dig into character a little more, though, because I always feel like, with great characters, that's what makes people latch onto a story. The reason people keep coming back to the Dresden Files. Yes, the plot is fun and action packed, but they love Harry Dresden. We love Harry, right? Like that's why we're coming back. So character development, growth, so important in any book, any series. How do you manage those elements in your work?
Well, you need to know where your character is going to start, and you need to know where they're going to finish every book. And you need to know where they're going to start at the beginning of the show, and where they're going to finish at the end of it. So for Harry Dresden, I rolled up a first level wizard, D&D style, with a D&D character sheet, one of the old ones that has a little shield for the armor class. Yeah, and I rolled up a wizard he only had a 16 intelligence, but he had an 18 constitution, and I knew he was going to get beat up a lot. Because otherwise, how do you show that he's got a constitution?
Right.
I mean, come on.
He does get beat up a lot.
Yeah, and so I made up, essentially I made up these milestones for Harry that I knew, he was going to progress through as a wizard, and he hits one of them every book or two. And a lot of the milestones were not him progressing as a wizard in terms of, he went up a level and got new spells and more hit points. It's he progresses as a wizard. Oh, wait a minute. He's learned that it might be smarter to let the little fish go and follow it back to where he can get to the rest of the serious bad guys. He's becoming more subtle. He's becoming more wary as he gets older. And just the fact that he's getting older is kind of an accomplishment for him, given the life he's living. But yeah, I mean, it's if you know where you're going, if you know where you're beginning and where you're going to end, you usually do all right. Think about driving across a country. If you're going to take a cross country trip, you're going to drive to Denver, for example. You don't know exactly how you're going to get to Denver, but you're going to start in where are you at?
I'm in Ecuador, so it'll be a long drive.
Oh, wow. All the drive.
Let's pretend I'm driving. We're starting in Detroit.
Yeah, Detroit. There we go.
Okay, yeah, starting in Detroit. All right. So you're going to be going south at some point. You're going to be going west at some point. And you have a whole bunch of different options for how you get there, but you don't need to know exactly which one you're taking when you start off. You don't need to know exactly what the next exit looks like. You kind of need to know the general direction of where you're going and generally how you're going to have to turn to get there. And doing characters over the long term is exactly the same thing. You get an idea where you're starting, you know where you end up. You're going to have some waypoints along the way, and you're going to find as you're going through your story, you're going to find that your characters are going to start hitting those waypoints very naturally because you're already thinking about this ultimate growth here. So you're going to be having the little bits of growth along the way, which is what people are going to be interested in seeing. So, at the start of every Dresden thing, it's like he needs to learn something by the end of this one. He needs to have figured something out. He needs to have done, something to advance his standing in the magical world, this time. He needs to have pulled off some accomplishment that is going to alter the events of the story world. That's also really important. And then the other thing that's really important is that you always remember that when characters are off screen, they don't stop existing. So when you've got a character who's off screen, you don't ever have them come back in exactly like they were last time. You have them come back in exactly like they were last time, but they've also got a teach themselves Spanish book, and they walk up and say the first few phrases to your character in Spanish, because they're trying to better themselves, or they come in with a broken nose. What happened? There was a thing, and you don't have to be super specific about all these things that happen in these characters' past, but you make it clear that they exist outside of just the viewpoint of your story characters that are interacting with them, and that gives your world so much greater a sense of vibrancy and purpose. So I mean, and that's something that I think that a lot of writers slip up on. Because they're so focused on just what's happening with their viewpoint characters that they'll have other characters go off screen and then they just sort of stop existing until it's time for them to come into another scene where they're needed. And you kind of wonder, wait a minute. And if you stop and think about it, you see these transitions happening and you think, wow, that's really rough, or that took a lot of coincidence to make happen, or that was quite contrived. That's kind of the most insulting thing you can say is, oh, well, there was a lot of contrivance in this plot. Where things just happened because the plot needed them to happen. That's what contrivance means. Because the writer needed them to happen, not because it made sense within the story world. So always remember that everybody keeps on existing and growing or degrading, as they go off screen.
Have you ever had trouble doing this or like adding new characters? You mentioned Harry's apprentice a little bit earlier, but like adding new characters into into a series as it's progressed, while at the same time like fleshing out the characters that you already have, but also making the new character feel like they've existed before their first appearance within the series as well?
It's often hard, but mainly what you do is to do that is when you have new characters come in, you show them interacting with the world in a way that makes sense for them. Harry in this new book, Harry gets a Valkyrie bodyguard, and she sort of rolls into it. She's like 7 foot tall, weighs 400 pounds. Carries a bag of gear that Harry can't lift over one shoulder. And sort of walks in and says, "Yeah, I've been hired to protect you. I'm Bear," and just get started. And he recognizes her as a Valkyrie right out the gate and everything, but then she just sort of moves in and starts taking over things. It's like, no, you need a bodyguard. You need to actually start taking your personal security a little bit more seriously. But you show her interacting with various creatures, and you show her having the good, and you establish her as this character who's several thousand years old and has been doing this for a while. And so when she interacts with someone, you go, yeah, that's about the right level of paranoia for that person. I've run into this character before. The readers run into this character before. So the readers get, when this character gets a little bit threatening towards Dresden, and suddenly the Valkyrie is there with the rifle held in one hand, to his face, and says, "I really suggest you rethink what you're about to do." And you go, okay, yeah, that is what an experienced bodyguard in that world should look like, and the sort of things that you know. So you just sort of, you think up, and what I do with characters is I think up 3 or 4 things that they've done, and I just write like as if there was a Midwest Arcane headline about something that they've done in the supernatural world. Cop saves little girl from troll, from Murphy, which actually became a short story later. But I'll just write these little things that they did, and just little short headlines, more or less. And I don't really have to make up much more of the story than that. But I know that that's in their background, and that's the sort of been one of the formative things that shaped that character. And as long as you can do that for each character and sort of weave them in by grabbing a couple threads that people are familiar with, and you want a 2 threads that people are familiar with for every new element. And so you want this new character to be connected in a couple of different ways to the story world they already know. And in this case, she's a Valkyrie, and she's a Valkyrie for hire. And both of those things are consistent elements within the story that we've run into in the story before. So when I say, okay, this person has hired the Valkyrie to protect you, it's like, oh, that makes sense. If I was a completely wealthy person who was looking out after Dresden, that's exactly what I would do. And and that's the 2-to-1 rule in action. And you can apply that. You can apply that to more than just fantasy, non-fantasy elements. It's basically any unfamiliar. You want to combine any unfamiliar element with familiar elements to make people comfortable with them and to tell them this is kind of where it fits into the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Charles Dickens, for that.
Right. Yeah. So that's, for adding new characters to the series. I'm curious too, though, about what about the consistent characters? So like Harry, right? We've been following Harry for a while, many books. And we've talked about his development, but how do you go about making sure that across that many books, or even a shorter series, right? Like Codex Alera.
Even a trilogy, yeah.
Yeah, even a trilogy, right? How do you keep that character fresh and keep the stakes impactful for the readers
and for the writer?
Well, yeah, and for the writer, yeah, that's true. Mm-hmm. That's true, because if you get bored writing him,
you can do it for the writer. As the writer, you're the most skeptical person of your own writing. So if you can keep yourself entertained while you're doing it, the readers are definitely going to come along for the ride. A lot of it is knowing where to begin and where to end, and so knowing incrementally how you can get there. Keeping things fresh for the character is a matter of giving them new experiences. It's just like it is for the rest of us. You go out and try new things. You go take a dance class. You go whitewater rafting and see what it feels like to almost die. I did that this year. It was fun. It's the most fun I've had in the longest time, and I was about 30 seconds away from dying of hypothermia.
Yeah.
It was cool.
I've been rafting before too. It is a good time. You should try it, MJ.
Yeah.
With that glowing recommendation, I am firmly on the fence. Thank you.
Yeah, have fun. Be on the cusp of death.
I had skipped the safety gear, so.
Well,
I had,
that's
I had,
your
I had,
fault.
I
That's your
had,
fault, Jim.
I had a flotation vest. I had a helmet on, but I wasn't wearing a wetsuit, and I went into a 37-degree river.
Oof,
And that's
that's
yeah,
cold.
yeah. That'll wake you up. Let me tell you, I was awake for about. Uh, uh, and apparently, I got more dopamine in that experience than I would have if I'd done cocaine. So,
That's all you need.
that cold immersion does weird things to your brain.
Yeah.
But anyway, you give your character new experiences. You stick them in places they've never been before. There's all kinds of different ways to threaten your character. From threatening them personally to threatening the things or people they care about. But the really critical thing is knowing your beginning point and your end point, and escalating incrementally, so that you don't have a whole lot of power creep coming into the series. With your character becoming so much more powerful than all the people he's got to deal with. I like to follow the way Scalzi talks about soldiers in Old Man's War. This is one of the lines that I remember that John wrote because he's brilliant. But he writes that soldiers have never gone to war with what they wanted, only with what they needed. And that is my attitude for Dresden. When Dresden gets a new superpower, he needs it just to survive. Just to get through the day, he's going to need that. When Dresden develops a new enemy, gains a new ally, gains a new weapon, he's going to need those. And then I also have his enemies growing too. You look at Marcone, who started off as a regular gangster and is now a verifiable nightmare.
Yeah.
And I'm having so much fun with that. As an enemy, Lara has grown in different dimensions. Where she has a great deal of influence among the movers and shakers in the mortal world. Even more so than Marcone does. And just the various things that are happening. Everybody who is out there is trying to grow. Everybody's out there is trying to become more dangerous. All of his enemies are people who collect power, and they love collecting power. And it is their purpose in life, and they need to do it just to survive. So they're doing it much more frantically than regular people do anything. But that all kind of that helps you scale things all together. As long as your characters who are off screen are not just sitting still waiting for their call to be called on the stage and hit their mark. They're busy doing stuff and growing. You're not going to have a problem with your character getting too big or too powerful.
I like it.
Yeah.
Make things incremental. Because it's like the fact that you said I'm having fun with this. That means that the reader is going to have fun reading.
You're gonna have a blast with it, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, Jim, what final piece of advice do you have for a writer looking to create compelling sequels, series, scenes as they progress with their work?
Don't be afraid to torture your characters.
Great advice.
Seriously, you don't have to be a sadist to be a writer, but it helps a lot. Don't be afraid to show your characters going through pain and then overcoming it. And then the other thing that I always have to say to beginning writers, don't be afraid to exaggerate things, to make things a little bit cartoonish, because it doesn't come off the same way to the reader as it does to you. I mean, Dresden, the example that I always remember is my writing teacher said she started off writing Westerns, and she wrote Western after Western, and her teacher just kept telling her, you're not exaggerating enough. You're not being dramatic enough with it. So until finally she wrote a character who rode into town, who was 6.5 feet tall and wearing nothing but long johns and a gun belt, and boots that were too small. With the toes dragging on the ground on the mule that he was riding, with an orange hat on his head and a cigar in his mouth, and dynamite on a bolero across his chest, and had to ride into town like that. And the writing teacher went, "Yep, that's how you start a story. That's about the."
Because that's like the person who comes in like saying, "I've been learning Spanish." It's like, what the fuck has that guy been up to? What are you doing, man?
What is? Yeah, or the character who comes in, now he's wearing an eye patch. What happened? Look, there was a girl. I'm not going to say anything else. And you just leave it at that. But yeah, I mean, you kind of have to go over the top a little bit. And that's something that I've noticed among aspiring writers. They're so concerned with keeping things real that they're too nervous to make things as broad and as confident and as magical as they need to be. And when you're a writer, you're kind of a symphony conductor, and the really cool symphony conductors do not make little movements. They're up there. They look like freaking wizards. They're from that Mickey Mouse cartoon, right? But yeah, and that's who you are. As a writer, that's who we are. We're the wizards. We're the ones who are making magic here, and it's a very subtle magic, and it's something that happens inside people's heads. But if you think about it, you're creating these alternate worlds that people are visiting through hallucinating while looking at chicken scratches on a page. That's kind of magical right there. You need to take that mantle responsibly.
Yeah, there's magic in the creation. We are writing fantasy and science fiction here, so we shouldn't be too
and not only
high
that,
and mighty.
We're sharing our imaginations. Yes. We're sharing imaginations with other humans, and we have they're so limited in how we can do that. We're limited by just this language that we speak that's so awkward, and we can put it on a page and it conveys even less. So I mean, it's really what we're doing here is we're seriously, we're doing stuff that should not happen, and yet we're making it happen every day. That's pretty miraculous. So if you're going out to be a writer, you're going out to be a miracle worker. Act like it.
That is a perfect note to end on.
I was going to say, what a great soundbite. That's awesome. Yeah.
For doing this masterclass with us, doing this two-parter, Jim.
Certainly.
Thank you so much.
Hey, you're very welcome.
Jim, where can people find you online?
You can find me at jimbutcheronline.com or jim-butcher.com, or you can just Google search Jim Butcher and my web page will come up. And I've got like percentage bars of what I'm working on and how close it is to being done.
You're doing a Brandon Sanderson.
I am. I want to be more accountable to my readers, who are my actual bosses. My editors, they can't do a thing with me, but I am responsible to my readers. I decided, okay,
they are our bosses.
I need to start doing that and get back on track.
Yeah. They're the real bosses here.
They are.
Not anybody else. Awesome. And go pick up The Olympian Affair, Jim's new book. Go buy
it's available now. I think it's one of my better books. Enjoy.
Yeah. It's fantastic, and I'm really looking forward to the series continuing. Speaking of series and sequels and all that, but you can also follow SFF Addicts on Instagram, Twitter, Threads, and all that good stuff at sffaddictspod, or you can follow me at Adrian M. Gibson. MJ, where can people find you?
Yeah, catch me on literally all of the social platforms. I'm chronically online at MJ Kuhn Books, or mjkuhn.com has all my links.
All right. Thank you so much, MJ. Now, everyone out there, keep reading, keep imagining, and we'll see you next time on SFF Addicts.